As a filmmaker, what I like to bring to the table is a grounded world. It's a world that feels lived in. And for me, the more you can populate that world with actors who have the skills and can do the specific actions of the characters for real, it's incredibly important.
Physicality for an actor is huge. What happens is it just gives an extra level of authenticity.
After doing months and months of broad strokes training and building up the strength to be able to do the other stuff, we honed in for more specific skills needed for the actual scenes.
It was really lovely because it was about finding a physicality, physically feeling like you were changing and getting into that role. Working with people who come to work early every day because they just want to be there so badly. It was fun.
Guy Norris and Richard Norton, they were fantastic collaborators when it came to helping the actors develop those styles.
The mistake that's often made is a choreographer will often do a whole sequence. It's more or less a showcase of, gee, look at all these fancy techniques, without considering the main part is, what are you asking your actor to be able to do? So the techniques and the choreography for me is very much aligned with, can I design a set of sequences that the actor is more than capable of doing?
Through the course of the show, the amount of times we've actually had to use our stunt doubles in a sequence I can count on one hand.
You gonna come down from there or what? Someone's happy.
With everybody, it's looking at what their strengths are and then combining that with what their character traits and trying to meld them both together.
I got to do all this cool stuff I never would have done before, like learning how to do the silk stuff you see at like Cirque du Soleil. That stuff's incredibly hard, but really fun.
As Harley Quinn, part of her character's backstory is she's a pretty fantastic gymnast. So to have the actors to be so committed and willing to get into shape really allows you to shoot things in a way that you believe it that much more.
It takes a tremendous amount of coordination and athleticism to do the kind of stuff that all of them are doing. Margot does 97% of her stunts in this movie. She embraced everything we throw at her. She makes it her own and does it better than we could have ever assumed it was going to be.
I hope you got insurance.
For our car crash sequence, one of the keys for us was getting Margot comfortable underwater for a minute or a minute and a half.
And there's this first little period of it that's comfortable, serene. For some people, that's 30 seconds. For other people, it's into the 2 to 3 minute range. And then that urge to breathe comes knocking and sometimes kicking down the door. And your fear of suffocation is a primal fear. And so we have to give them information behind knowing the different breathing styles, the muscles involved, some of the different techniques. That's when the real work of breath holding begins.
I got to hold my breath for 5 minutes. I was very, very pleased with myself.
Obviously, Guy, Glenn, and Richard do a tremendous amount of pre-production training and design and maximize what the actors can do to make them look the best when they're doing stunts.
It was very important that you were fit. Killer Croc is quite bulky, he was a big guy. So my schedule was pretty rigorous. An hour in the morning was just weightlifting, followed by fight training with the stunt crew. We were really developing techniques for Killer Croc. This is the first time we've seen him.
There was Kempo karate, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing with Richard Mosquito. He was our in-house sensei, and weightlifting. And yeah, there was sort of pretty extreme physical demands for all of us to sort of get in that kind of elite shape.
I think the amount of training really, really helped out. During pre-production, we went through 1 hour of fitness training and then a couple hours of very personal character training.
One of the main philosophies is the mind is primary, so it's preparing people not just physically but psychologically for the challenges that they may face, how they approach things, how they deal with things. Once you do have that strength of mind, it's amazing what you can accomplish.
To get my body to that point, as will get myself to that space where I feel like I could hurt somebody really badly if I wanted to, that was super empowering.
One day, I'm gonna rain down on you like the Holy Ghost.
The fight aspect of it was, I think, important to David because it's part of who all these people are. And there's this sort of edge to all these characters. And, you know, if that wasn't part of your life as a person coming in, it was going to be by the time you left. You were going to be, to some degree, a fighter.
Because of dedication, Cara, Karen, Jai, and Jay, they were able to actually earn a full yellow belt ranking in Kempo Karate. David Ayer likes this, a sense of reality, and that's what this foundation gives them, is a sense of reality, that there is a discipline and honor and a sense of being humble in karate.
Gentlemen, come on up here. Bravo team here, Alpha team over here.
David has a background in the military. He was a submariner when he was a young man, but then he teamed up with a couple of former Navy SEALs guys that weren't just Navy SEALs, they'd gone to another level. And my character, Rick, is very much what they were. David really wanted to give us as close to a first-hand Navy SEAL special operation experience as you can get.
We have hostiles up ahead. Light it up!
The directive with the actors was to build them first mechanically proficient with different weapon systems, and then work the psychological aspect, get them into combat mindset. And it wasn't just static shooting. We were also doing transition drills.
Push him over. Push him over, all right?
We apply a lot of pressure where we want to create fatigue so that we do challenge their decision-making process, so that when we are engaging targets with those weapon systems, they have to tap into something else to stay on point.
It was intense. For 3 days, we went in deep. We had 2 or 3 extensive personal training sessions where we went really hard.
Stay away.
And then, you know, we get woken up after we slept for maybe 1 hour. And it becomes very real when you're with these guys that have done it and you know that this is their reality. All the military training that we've done and all the gun training with these guys, something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.
We say we get this over with.
We had a whole sequence where Will's constantly firing, as smooth as if he'd held it all his life. That's that authenticity you really strive for, and that allows him to be on camera.
Wanted to really learn how to shoot, how to really be able to take a room if I had to take a room. Once the mentality sets in real life, then it's easy to blend it into the character.
When your magnums run dry, we may as well go double-handed, because it's the most accurate way to shoot.
Because I knew he'd played Ali, he would have done a lot of boxing training, so we'd focus a lot on a boxer's kind of movement and footwork with him, even though he's got his 2 wrist magnums. It's kind of like punching, but it's the attitude that a boxer would have, knowing that would be most comfortable to him.
Yeah.
One of the most exciting parts of my job is getting an actor to actually go and push themselves beyond where they think that they are comfortable, giving them a bit of excitement in the day so they've achieved more than they think they can ever achieve. And then it's surrounding them with really good people, good fight choreographers, good trainers, good gymnastic coaches.
They learned a lot, and I learned a lot too. It's reciprocated if you're a dedicated teacher.
To have the actor capable of doing 99% of their action is a godsend for the movie because they're organically sort of connected with that character. It's not just anymore a series of movements. It's a character that understands drama and you can see the character thinking within the choreography. I honestly think there's almost nothing you could choreograph that all these actors wouldn't be capable of. As a choreographer, that's fantastic.
That shit crazy.
Suicide Squad's been around a long time and a lot of incarnations. It sort of starts out as Task Force X and evolves into Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad began back in the late 50s. Robert Kanigher and Ross Andru drew 5 issues in The Brave and the Bold. It wasn't in its own title. It was about a team of adventurers, and then they didn't do anything else with it.
It was a much more grounded look at this group of military operatives. They were just military operatives that were on covert missions that were dangerous and considered suicidal, hence the nickname Suicide Squad. And Rick Flag actually was the leader of that military operation.
For me, I was kind of most interested in the Ostrander series from the 80s. I'm a child of the 80s and I grew up during the Cold War, and the Suicide Squad of that time period was full of that government paranoia and the black ops and the secrecy and the idea of using criminals to do things that you might not acknowledge in public.
When I came into it, the editor, Bob Greenberger, said, we got this title that we haven't done anything with in a long time, and you can do anything you want, and it's called Suicide Squad. And my first reaction is, what a stupid name. Who in their right minds would belong to something that called itself a Suicide Squad? I started to go, well, okay, who would? People who don't have any other choice. Well, who don't have any other choice? Prisoners. Prisoners don't have a choice. Prisoners in the DC universe are supervillains. Okay, I like supervillains a lot. I like playing with supervillains. They appeal to the bad side of us. They say things, they do the things that we might think or feel, but we don't do, mainly because we're more civilized than they are. I didn't even want the mainstream villains. I wanted villains that they could say, yeah, sure, John, go ahead, take them, do whatever you want. Because then I could play with their backgrounds, their characters, and if you're going to call it Suicide Squad, characters have to die along the way. And we did that from the very first appearance of the squad in Legends.
It's been one of my favorite comics forever. It's full of characters that you at one time wished would get together, and now all of a sudden they're together. And not only are they together, but they're going on missions together, and they are experiencing things together, and you get an opportunity to explore psychologically what all these characters are like in their personal lives, and then all of a sudden that is sort of squished together, and you see how it comes out on the big screen. And I think there's a tremendous amount of wish fulfillment with these characters. There's a lot of people that wish that they could do the kinds of things these characters do.
I think the idea of taking characters that aren't typically good, that are the ones that are actually fighting the heroes, whether it be Superman or Batman, I think that's something that's fresh.
The Suicide Squad characters, both as individuals and as part of the squad, have a legacy that goes back generations. So it's rewarding for us to be able to take these characters and bring them to the big screen.
And let me shift you guys this way a little bit, and Greg's the back there. Thank you. For me, the struggle is to be respectful of the source material, of the comics, of the origin stories of these characters as written, and at the same time to adapt them, because it is an adaptation. You know, these are new scenes, it's new dialogue, new trajectories for them. They're coming together in new ways.
Amanda Waller was my creation. She didn't exist before Suicide Squad. I wanted someone to head the squad who was not typical. I wanted a woman, because you didn't have many very strong women there to begin with. I wanted someone to be African American, because you didn't have a lot of strong African American characters at that point in DC either. And I wanted her to be just as tough, but no superpowers. That her power was her own strength of will and her badass attitude.
Darling, I'm walking out of here free man, or we're gonna start having some real fun.
Why don't we have some fun?
One of the best scenes I've ever read of Amanda Waller was when the Justice League and the Suicide Squad first crossed paths, and she put Batman in his place. She says some veiled threats to him as if she knows everything about him. And Waller, when you think about it, is really the only character that could do that.
The next war will be fought with these metahumans, ours or theirs. We're not the only ones kicking up rocks looking for them.
Now, Amanda Waller, I think, is one of the most interesting characters in the film. Wicked intelligent, incredibly formidable as a person, and who can walk into the most powerful room in Washington, D.C. and manipulate anybody in that room to get what she wants.
I connected to her because everything I read about her out of the Cabrini Green projects in Chicago, had a couple of kids and a husband who were murdered, then rose up and became this high official in the government. I was like, that's interesting. Usually they're being born out of some pond somewhere, you know, out of some frog's mouth. But this was someone who I could really root in truth and the afro, and it's something that spoke to me.
She doesn't have any problem exploring the gray areas of getting things done.
The fact that she was in charge of this whole squad did draw me in too, I have to say. I like being the badass.
We just saved the world. A thank you would be nice.
Thank you.
The Suicide Squad for her starts out as just another means to an end. By the end of the film, she would never admit it, but I think she does learn to respect them. She does learn that they are truly capable people.
Rick Flag was originally part of the Suicide Squad in the 50s. I wanted to have that touch of continuity to it. Originally, his origin went back to World War II. That was a little far back now for what we were doing. So I made him Rick Flag Jr., and Rick Flag Sr. had the origin that Rick Flag originally had in The Brave and the Bold. He was a military man, and he also had suffered and lost. Waller hires him to keep the bad guys in line.
Colonel Flag's role is to take some very unruly kindergartners out on a field trip.
You're going somewhere very bad to do something that'll get you killed. But until that happens, you're my problem.
He's a military guy. He's very square, very direct fella.
I remember right before we were about to shoot, Joel was finishing another film. David was like, I want Joel to go out in the wilderness and just get his ass kicked. I want these guys to like show him what it's like to actually have to be that real guy. And Joel was more than willing to do it.
He's the kind of guy that has been in all the different kinds of various special forces groups. David really wanted to give me as close to a first-hand experience as you can get. So we went in deep with these military guys.
Gonna rely on the tension of the spring to seat that bolt all the way.
We had 2 or 3 extensive personal training sessions where we were out in the woods and carrying stuff and finding targets and then coming back. It was intense, but helpful to find the core of the character and understand where he comes from.
By giving the actor that experience and be able to see firsthand what it would be like is just only giving them more tools in their arsenal to work with.
Deadshot's an interesting character. In the comic lore, he's the man that never misses. He has some sort of amazing gift with bullets. I guess he's the bullet whisperer, you could say. And he puts that skill to work. He runs around the world whacking people for whoever's gonna pay him money. But it's also cost him a lot. It's cost him his relationships. It's cost him his daughter, his family.
And that separates him from the pack. There's so many assassins and good shots in the DC universe, but Deadshot is the most complex that walks that line between good guy and bad guy because of family.
With Deadshot, I remember seeing a TV interview with a hired killer from the mob, and one thing that he said really struck me. He said, I don't care if I live, so why should I care if you live? And that became very much part of Deadshot's operating system. He's not looking to kill himself. It's not a death wish. He just doesn't care. He doesn't care if he lives or dies, and so he doesn't care if you live or die.
Check, pop, pop, drop.
I could not get my head around the idea of killing people for money. And I read a book called The Anatomy of Motive. One of the first lines in the book says, why did he do it? It says, simple, because it felt good.
Every time I put this on, somebody dies.
And?
I like putting it on.
That was such an explosive comprehension. He says the question isn't why did he do it? He did it because it felt good. The question is why does it feel good? And then just as an actor, it exploded so much in understanding character. You hit a wall when you want to know why someone does something versus the acceptance of the fact that it's enjoyable. Then it really helped me to create that backstory of power and dominance and how he must have, during his childhood, felt really disempowered. And to be able to kill somebody from 100 yards was super empowering.
Suicide Squad!
Harley Quinn is far and away the most recognizable character in the squad, the most popular. She was introduced in the Batman animated series in the 90s and then was introduced into the comic books through that, and it's become one of the biggest characters in comics.
There's something archetypical about Harley Quinn. It's interesting because as a character in the comic book canon, she's maybe 20 years old, but she's so iconic.
Something tells me a whole lot of people are about to die.
She's a character that does what she wants. She's uncensored. She's very in the moment.
Stupid bitch, you're ruining date night!
she's mad, she's insane, she's all over the place, but she's tough, she can fight, she's witty, she's clever, she's beautiful.
Harley's incredibly dimensional and incredibly liked by the fans, which is really interesting, and I didn't understand why to begin with before I'd started reading the comics, and then of course about 3 comics in, I was obsessed with her, as everyone else is. But I wanted to figure out what fans liked about her so much, and it kind of turns out, in my opinion, that people really like how flawed she is.
Dr. Quinzel, I live for these moments with you.
At one point, she was this sort of demure, quiet psychiatrist, and she was the Joker psychiatrist in Arkham Asylum, which maybe was her undoing or her creation. And that's the beginning of their relationship and the beginning of her history, in a sense. The question is, did she create herself? Did he create her?
Turning her from Dr. Harleen Quinzel to Harley Quinn, that transformation is pretty interesting to watch because you meet both characters.
You're looking at him trying to get out of the way, and then, oh, it's Diablo doing fire shit.
Dr. Quinzel obviously has a lot of issues in my backstory, which I always tried to keep true to the comics as well. And then I researched criminal minds and mental illnesses and things like that, and all of that was really interesting and definitely helpful, but the most interesting thing I ended up researching was codependence, and I was kind of taken by the idea that people could really let their lives fall apart over a person, and the fact that it is a compulsion, the way like an alcoholic is addicted to alcohol. And once I thought of her relationship with Joker in those terms, as a compulsion, as an addict, I had a world of empathy for her, and I could justify almost any of her actions that way.
Killer Croc, he's more like the original version, which was this guy who had a kind of a skin condition. He wasn't a giant monster like he sometimes is in the books. And Croc, to me, very dangerous and deadly.
Waylon Jones, as he was known before he became Croc, has such a rich backstory, from being this villain who pits against Batman, right back to the beginnings of him as a child and being raised by this abusive aunt who used to ridicule him and beat him and try to scrub the scales off of him, because as a teenager, he started to develop this skin affliction and scales started coming out.
He was treated like a monster and he became a monster, and really isolated himself from the world and isolated himself from society and become a bit of this literal underworld figure.
David had a pretty precise idea of what he wanted Killer Croc to look like initially. He showed me some photographs and images, but it evolved as we moved closer to principal photography. Initially, he was a lot greener, and then David had this great idea. He wanted all the characters very rooted in reality, so that it was more the shades and tones of my own colors, the browns and beiges, and it just made it more organic and more real. You could see the human side, but it turned into this creature.
I live underground. Y'all are just tourists.
I think Adewale may have actually eaten a person for real as prep for the character. He really became a crocodile for this movie, and there were people in the film who came up missing. It was a lot of fun.
Set. Ready, and action. Captain Boomerang is an interesting character, and he has a little bit of a bad legacy in the comics because the world evolves, and when you have comics that go back to the 60s, we definitely live in different times, thankfully.
Some of the characters weren't being used anymore by some of the other books. For instance, The Flash, as it was being relaunched. Well, they weren't using the Rogues Gallery there right away.
No honor among thieves, eh?
And Bob Greenberger suggested that we use Captain Boomerang. I said, no, Captain Boomerang, he's just a stupid-looking character. He's silly. But then we got into him, we started using him, and I love playing with Captain Boomerang. He became one of the stars of the book.
John Ostrander saying that Captain Boomerang is one of his favorite characters to write is because he's so much fun to write, because you can do anything, and there's no situation where he's not going to crack open a beer and take a sip in the middle of a dramatic situation, because that's just who he is.
Captain Boomerang's probably my favorite character. Growing up reading the comics, he was always my favorite in the squad. He's just a jerk, and he's unapologetically a jerk. There's a scene in the film that is in the comics with Slipknot where he tells Slipknot these bombs are total bullshit. I'm out of here, you should go that way, I'll go this way. And Slipknot's like, okay. And then he waits and Boomerang hears a big explosion. He's like, oh, I guess it's real.
With Jai, he's playing a bogan, which I think is Australian for a redneck.
Boomerang's a jewel thief, a sort of skeezy character and not really necessarily likable. And David really wanted me to find my inner shitbag, pretty much. His words, not mine.
Well, all right, let's try this alt version.
We're a bunch of soft c***s.
No.
So the next few months were basically a journey of discovery.
Captain Boomerang is really the it of the group, the spirit animal. He does what he does when he wants to do it, and he's a special fella. He's a very special fellow. Is he trustworthy? No, not at all. I wouldn't trust him for a second, but he's a lot of fun to hang out with.
We'll have a spot of luck, eh? They're walking the park. Easy peasy.
Don't make me shoot you.
There's actually been a lot of different El Diablos in the comics, and this current version isn't very old. He's only a few years old. He's more of a modern-day version of the character. The original character was an old Western character, and this new one inherits this kind of dark, supernatural ability and can create fire.
I wanted to do a Latino superhero, so of course I drew on the stuff that I knew from people I grew up with. I wanted to do a character that came from that, but then went on to something better than that. It's not about where he is or where he came from, it's about where he's going, and where he's going hopefully is a place of inner peace and redemption.
Can you hold the back of her head with your hand like that? One of the reasons I wanted to do this film was to bring Diablo to life. You just don't really see any Mexican-American characters represented in comic book lore, and he's really one of the absolute few ones out there. That character is someone I can identify with. These are like the guys I grew up with.
He's a fighter, but he's given up that side of his life. He's sort of backed away from criminality. He's backed away from aggression. He's backed away from being who he is, you know, because this superpower that he has is an innate part of him.
Playing El Diablo is not easy. He's an extremely emotional character. He's got a really dark background. And there's a majority of the movie where he's refusing to act, I think, and to have that kind of restraint as an actor, and to take that on and to make it his own and to make it work. He really has a presence.
You create this backstory for the characters, and so I explored that fully, and there's this sort of edge to all these characters. And if that wasn't part of your life as a person coming in, it was gonna be by the time you left.
Oh, yeah, you're the fire bloke, eh?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
Right, yeah, hey. Well, looky here. Ooh, it's fire. Ooh.
Katana was a member of a group called the Outsiders. And the Outsiders were a group of heroes that Batman put together after he left the Justice League. And Katana probably is grown to be the most popular out of the new characters that were introduced in that group. Her soul sword, it's called, traps the souls of anyone it kills. It was once used by her husband, and her husband was killed by his souls trapped inside that sword. So a big element of Katana is talking to that sword, communicating with her husband.
ここで私の人生が終われば、やっとあなたと一緒になれる。
She's a samurai, and I think of Amanda Waller and Rick Flag as my lord. You don't question your lord when you're a samurai, you just do. And you serve your entire life protecting them. And she is very loyal, and she'd do anything to fulfill the mission, whatever it was, just because that's what Amanda Waller wanted.
The physicality of that character and the sword fighting, everything that Katana needed to be was incredibly important. It was also important to have her be played by a Japanese actor. And Karen really doesn't have a resume. She really doesn't have a history as an actor, but sometimes as a director, you just go on instinct. So you can land and pull it? She was a huge surprise, and it was fantastic to just watch her grow and develop and really become Katana.
So much of her character comes from her martial arts background and her katana skills. So it helped a lot to go through the fitness training during pre-production. Physically looking like the character helped, but also being able to do all of the moves and go through all of the action on my own. That's when it felt like I was truly becoming Katana.
There it is, ready?
Pussy.
I said pussy.
Oh, sorry. Part of this journey is you go and you make a movie and you cast actors, and you have all these smart, cagey, capable, talented people who are meeting each other for the first time. And for me, the film lives or dies on their on-screen chemistry and believing that they are a family and that they do have this regard and trust and familiarity with each other. And I was really anxious during the initial weeks of rehearsal as they slowly started to break the ice and bond. And then once we're shooting, I look around and they're always hanging out together on set, off camera. They seem to become inseparable. I go on Instagram and I'm like, what are you guys doing? What's this? You know, every weekend they're hanging out together. So they became lifelong friends out of this.
David! David, hi! David!
We were really wonderfully surprised about how well the squad bonded once they were out of Bel Rev. That shooting period went on and the film went on and on. They became closer and closer.
In the scenes that there needed to be a little more friction in the early part of the film, David actually had to slow us down a little bit. He was like, no, you're not friends till later in the movie. Right? You know, so we all got snuggled up really quickly.
And we bonded because we all wanted to make a great movie for David. Seriously. Anything he wanted us to do. He could have told us to dive out of a damn plane in a parachute, 15,000 feet in the air. We would have thought about doing it.
The squad was something else. Like, the squad on screen is really cool. The squad off screen, I've never seen anything like it. I've never experienced anything like it on a film before. I mean, we were joined at the hip. You couldn't separate us. Cara's not even in the squad technically, and she's one of our most integral members off screen. She was always there. She's so much fun. It was something really unique, and it definitely added something on screen that I don't think we could have had without that bonding process.
My first encounter with David Ayer was at his house. And he said, he was like, you know, I don't want to just do a superhero movie, man. I want them to be human beings, you know? I want it to be rooted in some truth.
I worked really hard to create a grounded film so you could feel like you could drive down the street and look down an alley and see Deadshot doing his business. Or pass Harley Quinn, you know, in another car with Joker, which may not be a good thing.
In this very dark, gritty world that could almost be reality, it doesn't seem as surreal as some of those other movies you see.
I have a vision in my head, and my job is to explain and translate these things I see in my mind into things that can be sewn, built, painted. Great collaborator was Oliver Scholl, the set designer. He pulled me in directions I didn't want to go, and I pulled him in directions he didn't want to go. And the end result is spectacular.
Superhero stories are inherently fantastic, but the approach was very realistic. Sometimes even downplaying elements, where normally you would have gone like a bit more shiny. To say, no, we're not going to go that way. We're going to stay very grounded with it.
Clear for transport! Welcome to Bel Rev's Special Security Barrack. Here to assist you in any way.
Bel Rev was a design that Oliver and David came up with. And of course, it's set in the swamp, but there's so many different ways that you can execute that.
Hey! You feel it?
David had friends that worked in prison and got reference material from them, down to the layout of the security table and what would be on the screens. Really the minutiae of everything.
And that kind of authenticity, and that's a real testament to David's process and wanting to make sure there really isn't any detail that's not too important, because they're all important.
We're going live with Task Force X. Pull them.
David uses this phrase a lot, chasing the real. And from the beginning, he said, I don't want them in supervillain, superhero suits. He was very interested in how do we find that person in the reality of our world and then heighten it and distill the iconography of the comic book characters into this reality.
Won't fit anymore?
Kate Hawley, the costume designer, she had a lot of different potential examples from the different characters because of the comic, and it was really important for David to give them a sense of grittiness, so they had that sense that you could find them out on the street.
I'm beautiful. Yeah, you are.
There are so many intricate little nuances that people have spent a really long time working on and thinking about. So I appreciate the time they take, and all of it's incorporated into her costume, her hair, her makeup, her props. They're an incredible team.
One of the guys that turned out to be a real treasure for me in the journey of putting this movie together is a gentleman by the name of Robbie, who's a Toronto tattoo artist. It was simply going to be, hey, help me come up with some tattoo ideas for these characters. But in working with him, in these conversations with him, that the characters sort of grew and evolved.
A big part of what I do is listening to people, and I always search for keywords, whether it's a specific area or a time period or a color palette. That he's really keen on giving very specific keywords, but if it needs tweaking, he'll tell you specifically. Or he'll just get his hands dirty and he'll just do it. He'll make a little sketch because he knows what he likes and he knows what he doesn't like.
Each tattoo on everybody has its own specific story. You know, there's Enchantress, who has these very specific tribal tattoos and hex signs and ancient magic runes from grimoires and things like that. Everything with its own specific sort of language and history.
I mean, the process was kind of interesting. It started off with a little bit of tattoos, and they started growing. It was like everywhere. My entire body was covered with tattoos. And during sort of that process of trying to find the complete look of the character, I was like, yeah, the more I don't look like me, the better it's gonna be.
Wait, what's that crap on your face? Does it wash off?
I'm so scared people are gonna go get rotten tattooed on their cheek now.
Yeah, girl, she got the glove.
Oh, no. We all ended up, giving each other tattoos.
You want it traced or freehand?
Freehand.
Freehand. Here goes.
Here we go, here we go. You want me to roll up with
I'm
your
nervous.
camera, Dave?
It was like Harley's tattoo parlor.
Like that size? Like that?
Sure.
All right, that's good enough.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
the wife.
So,
Wait, we gotta clean it.
I think with the hands, adding more. Yeah, like just some random surfaces or something. So, what is this? Oh yeah, that's yeah, that's a good reach.
The EAs, or these eyes of the adversary, are these beings, but what do these things look like? So we were really in the beginning kind of fumbling around, right? You throw stuff up on the wall and see what sticks. One day, David Ayer came in, he was like, God, I had this insane dream last night. And he took a marker and he went to the whiteboard and he started drawing. And he drew the craziest looking thing. It was this kind of humanoid figure, but it was a head covered with eyeballs. And he's like, that's what they look like. That drawing, after trying literally dozens of other designs, that's what we ended up going with.
Yeah. So you guys then tactically move into this space.
If David Ayer is going to do a single comic book film, Suicide Squad is it. Because he's got that military background, he has the knowledge of how it would work, and he brings that side of it, how a mission would actually lay out. So all of that stuff feels very, very real and authentic because it is authentic.
These guys have SIGs, these guys are gonna have blocks.
A couple of buddies of mine who are, former Navy SEALs came in to help me out with the show and to train the actors in weapons manipulations and small arms tactics so that when people are doing things on camera, they're doing them correctly.
A lot of movies these days, action sequences can just be filled with explosions just for an explosion's sake. But in this movie, everything is more surgical, like a Spec Ops unit, and how that Spec Ops unit would conduct their actions on an objective. We're definitely outmanned, and we have to navigate that knowing we're going to be running out of rounds really quick. So it's about surviving that, it's about being resourceful, and I think a lot of people will appreciate that.
You never lose ground, you're always on the offense, you're always attacking.
David makes sure the set stays populated with experts and everything that you could possibly have a question about.
There was things that David did together which each department had that clearly defined the characters, and I think one of the strongest elements of the film is how defined the characters are. And he has a very interesting way of doing his cast rehearsals.
There was a huge character prep for this movie. You know, we all got in a room together and we worked probably for about a month, but it was really diving in and understanding these characters.
We all had to rehearse, improvise, we'd use the script and we'd go away from the script. And this process is team building in a way, because everybody has to be vulnerable in front of the rest of the group.
I knew you'd come through. And then at the end of all these like ups and downs of the process you go through, you end up just having this like insane trust. I'd do anything. I'd go in any direction in a scene that he told me to. I have like a trust for him that I have never found in any other work relationship.
When you see this guy coming, you start backing up.
You can't rehearse too much because no matter how much you rehearse, it's still going to be a surprise on set. But that's where the magic comes from, and that's where you then get the freedom to start ad-libbing and adding the humor and adding the life, because now they're in character.
Get them hands up! Hey, I'm cooperating. This is me being cool.
Hold your fire! Taser! Hold your fire!
The importance David gave that, again, is just unheard of, and that's why I think this movie has heart, because he cares about the characters.
Let's shoot it. Let's do it. All your work, how it comes together into the frame that the camera sees, it's really high quality work. It's really spectacular what you guys have done.
You don't like that angle. The angle sucks, right? You wanted to cut a little more short.
No, it's perfect.
Okay.
It's just an odd angle choice.
That's terrible.
Would you die for me?
Yes.
I live for these moments with you.
I'm all yours. The Joker and Harley Quinn are unpredictable.
They are the king and queen of Gotham City. Talk about a romance gone wrong.
Come on, Puddin'. Do it!
You don't know whether Harley's gonna like laugh, hug you, or like shoot you in the face.
Stupid bats, you're ruining date night!
And then Joker's like even worse than that.
I think that the Joker is probably better known than the devil.
Some might say that the Joker is the most famous bad guy in the DC universe.
The trick was to be incredibly respectful of the legacy of the Joker and not tamper with that, yet at the same time reinvent.
I remember when I got the call, I had this simultaneous feeling of excitement and dread. Maybe is the right word, because it's not something that you really should do logically.
Because the character of the Joker is so out there. I mean, he's an anarchist. He's crazy. Jared's process of digging as deep as he did was one in which we wanted to support.
Once he was on the set, his voice changed, and he only spoke as Mr. J. Conducted himself as Mr. J. You really couldn't connect with him unless you called him J, Mr. J, Joker. And, you know, it creates an interesting set dynamic when somebody does that.
Everybody gets to sit in the chair. Start with you.
I would go into his trailer and have a conversation with him, and I remember the first time that happened, I was pausing because I realized I was actually having a conversation with Mr. J and not necessarily Jared.
That's right. Welcome. Welcome to my nightmare.
I was in another world. I was in another universe. It's exactly where I needed to be, and it was an incredible experiment, incredible exercise. So, you know, disappearing, going into that rabbit hole was something I never expected. And when we started to discover who the Joker was and what his process was, we were all like, oh my God, this is freaking genius. I mean, what he was doing was genius.
We continued, my friend. I have a feeling.
To see the cast react to what Jared was doing in the way that they did, when they're all in a scene together, you can feel that energy. You can feel that terror that they feel about what he's gonna do next, who he is, how crazy he is.
I could tell you meant that. You're gonna be my friend.
I saw the Joker as a modern guy who lives in our world who has a lot in common with contemporary gangsters and is of that culture.
I can't wait. This is gonna be a lot of fun.
When Jared came, the makeup and the hair was the first starting point, and that ended up leading the process with him.
Free. You're free, my man.
Beautiful.
Lamb chops.
One interesting thing that happened is we explored the purple suit a lot. It was decided it's just too much with all of the tattoos and the hair and everything. So we pared it right down, and really it was to give Jared room to let him play the character and be not overwhelmed with stuff.
Are you sweet-talking me? I love this guy. He's so intense.
The interesting thing about this Joker, it's more like the comic books. You do see like the more traditional look of the Joker. Really dark green hair, white skin. I love it because he's got the detail of metal teeth, because at some point someone knocked his teeth out. So to have a version of the Joker in this and have this cool relationship with Harley Quinn, which is relatively new to the age of comic books, it's really fun to see. It's exciting to bring that new element, I think, to film.
There is something you could do for me, Doctor.
Anything. I mean, yeah.
I need a machine gun.
A machine gun?
Harley is by far the most famous female villain in the DC universe. People have been waiting for Harley Quinn to hit the big screen.
What?
Harley Quinn's a new addition. Like only 5 or 6 years ago, she became a member of the Suicide Squad and really anchored that team in a brand new way.
What a ride!
Margot really settled into an incredibly difficult role. To be that spontaneous and be that humorous and be that soulful and be that powerful and tough, Margot worked very, 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 very hard to get there.
Boy, play with me.
That is a whole lot of pretty and a whole lot of crazy.
When I researched Harley Quinn, and the origins of a Harlequin was always like to be like this mischievous little sidekick. And I thought it was important to keep that element that she always wants to be a sidekick to someone, but she's being really mischievous about it, and that's what she finds so fun.
Harley Quinn, nice to meet ya. Love your perfume. What is that? The scent of death? She seems nice.
It was kind of cool because a lot of the other characters were obviously playing it like, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be with any of you guys. But for Harley, I played it that she was just like, yay, like first day of school, so many people to play with, this is gonna be great.
Something tells me a whole lot of people are about to die.
It was like walking into like a toy store and being like, what do I do first? I can mess with you, I can mess with you.
Hey, if you like a girl, can you light her a cigarette with your pinky? Because that would be real classy.
Her character, I mean, she's a complete psychopath in many ways. Yet there's something that like draws you in, right? She's a beautiful girl, but she's a very self-destructive individual. But she's really, I mean, she's just really interesting to watch.
Hey, come on.
What? I saw it move. See? I flinched, I think.
That was really important to definitely explore her flaws. And David is the guy that's going to delve deeper than anyone for those flaws.
So cool.
I feel like human instinct sometimes to want to be portrayed in a positive light.
Action.
Now that's killer app.
And David would always sway us the other way. He's like, no, if he's upset right now, you should say something mean to him right now, because that's what she would do.
When I get mad, I lose control, you know. I don't know what I do till it's done.
The kids?
He killed them. didn't you? And so it was really painful at times. We're doing really emotional scenes and you'd have a character, like Jay's character or someone really pouring their heart and soul out. And David would come and whisper in my ear and be like, now's when you stab him.
Own it. What do you think was gonna happen, huh?
Hey, Harley, come on.
To really dig in and sting them when they were down, that was in her nature, and I couldn't avoid that. I had to explore that as much as I explored, like, the funny side to her.
You know what they say about the crazy ones?
Huh?
The look is insane, and the hair and makeup was a real process. I mean, it was a 3-hour process every single day. We'd do the body paint, completely paint me white. Then there were 20 tattoos to put on, and a wig, and then the makeup, and then whatever cuts and bruises, you know, Harley had acquired by that point in the film. So, 3-hour process. It was fun, though. It's always, like, the best time to get into your character, and once you look like that, you kind of, I feel ready, like I feel like I'm Harley.
Seriously, the hell's wrong with you people?
We're bad guys. It's what we do.
Harley Quinn is extremely fun to watch because you have no clue what she's gonna do next.
Come on, baby.
She is an extremely emotional, complex character because she is a female Joker. She really is. I mean, the Joker created her.
Harley!
She's a strong character in her own right. She's not defined by the Joker anymore, even though they have a relationship, which I really love.
Puddin'! You got all dressed up for me?
Oh, you know I'd do anything for you. By the way, I've got some grape soda on ice and a bearskin rug waiting.
So in Suicide Squad, part of the story is this really epic romance between Joker and Harley.
In the comics, there's been a lot of different versions where it's a little bit antagonistic. It's not a healthy relationship often. And this is like Harley and the Joker are like Bonnie and Clyde in the DC universe.
It's a fascinating love story because
Harley Quinn!
Puddin'?
Oh.
You want me?
Oh, come to daddy.
That relationship is so interesting. It's just so filled with turmoil, and it's one of those relationships where they're so attached to each other and it's so dark that they can't get enough of each other.
He married me.
It's the very first time in a movie that I've ever been on where on day 2 of shooting on production, it was just Jared and Margot shooting that day. And the entire crew, you just kind of look around and their jaws are on the floor because they're watching something so special and so unique.
You dirty pervert. Oh my God. You people, what are you looking at? Shut up!
It was like pure entertainment for the crew.
Here we go. And action!
Get off me!
What do we have here?
The Harley Joker stuff was so unpredictable. Like the squad stuff, we had done so much rehearsal and we needed to because it bonded us in a way that none of us ever expected would happen, obviously. But the Joker stuff, Jared and I didn't really do any rehearsals off screen.
I'm rehearsal. Rehearsal.
It's really scary.
And it was perfect because then we would get in front of the camera and I didn't know what was gonna happen and he didn't know what was gonna happen. And I don't think anyone really knew what was gonna happen. And that's why those scenes were so electric because they were so unpredictable.
Okay, honey. It's me and you.
Let's do it.
I was lucky in that I had a pretty phenomenal partner in this. I was really lucky to work with her. Incredibly kind, incredibly patient, which you have to be with the Joker in the room.
Desire becomes surrender. Surrender becomes power.
You want this?
I do.
Oh, God, you're so good.
When you're acting with Joker, like, I didn't see any of Jared, not for a second. It was Joker, and he's nuts. But whatever the result was, it meant that we got these great moments on screen. No matter how far we delve, how many scenes we do, I just feel like I've only scratched the surface of Harley. Like, it's just a character that's like a bottomless pit of, like, issues. I could play Harley for like 10 years and be happy.
I think the Joker will live forever. I think that he's in some ways the perfect villain. He has stood the test of time, and there will always be a Joker. You may not think so, but he's there, waiting to chew your bloody face off.
There's so much richness and detail to these characters. It's very cool to see and hold some of these props as we develop them in our hands.
Wardrobe, what the props are, all of that helps you dive into the character life. As an actor, it just gives an extra level of authenticity.
Because we're dealing with the coolest, edgiest people around, each one of them has their signature look and props that they use.
These characters are so iconic, and people have lived with them for so many years. All of these things are carefully chosen, carefully designed, and have a very important role in this movie.
I was invited to fly to Toronto to meet with David. They basically showed me concept work, some of the art department illustrations. They showed me Kate Hawley's awe-inspiring costume concepts. Props and costumes worked together really closely. It was a great head start for me. The characters were so well developed at that point. I started to imagine designing the props right away. For instance, we were trying to come up with a concept for the Joker.
What?
He's a tactile person. He likes to have the most cutting-edge weaponry.
This looks neat.
The utensils that the Joker has, whether it's his handgun or his razor blade, has jewels or gold inlaid in it because he's that kind of guy.
The accoutrements certainly made an impact. Those little things, I think, help build the reality. When you dive into these worlds, your imagination is just lit on fire.
Come on, baby. Deadshot was a challenge because there was a lot of reference material to go by. There was a lot of different comic book versions of the wrist magnum.
The directorial encyclical that David sent down is that everything had to be real and operational. For example, Deadshot's wrist magnums, they were saw Glocks that actually would fire real bullets if somebody was dumb enough to put one in there.
Here we have Deadshot's wrist magnum. Deadshot's wrist magnum is based on a blank firing Glock. As he clicks this button, it's firing the magnum.
It just adds a whole other element of authenticity when you don't have to go bang, bang. You know, when you actually point it and you feel it. Fire! It's firing and there's recoil. But it just really gives it that next level of reality.
I was standing right next to him the very first time he fired that weapon, and I looked at him and he got this kind of like this little smile on his face, and you could tell he really liked it, and then before you know it, it was... David is an extremely knowledgeable gun person. He really knows his stuff. It's not a big deal to make a gun work to the layman, but to someone who knows weapons and someone who knows props, they know that it's a very tricky thing. Here's our next evolution of carbine.
This is great. Kind of old bullet carrier group. Yeah, go with that. Okay. I mean, if you can give me this weapon, we're in good shape.
Yeah, okay, good. Everything was done and built to look as though it was absolutely brand new, and then we have a tremendous scenic department that would then come and make it look like he's been carrying it for 3 years. It's chipped and it's worn, and really it's just exactly the way that David wants it. It's a very authentic looking weapon, considering it's a weapon that really is totally a fantasy piece.
Right here we're prototyping masks for Deadshot. We're going to go through a variety of designs and take the best elements of each and come up with a good one.
There was also a lot of comic book versions of the monocle. And so we researched and we collected those.
Maybe there's a way to put some red LEDs inside of here. Yeah, so it's like, theoretically, it has like a ranging function and then ballistic information.
The hell are they? You can cut and run, I'll blow your head off.
The idea of taking this group of supervillains, teaming them up with Navy SEALs, it's a great way to ground them in a familiar situation.
Being that command position, it's like Rick might not be the one that is on the gun, shooting and firing at everything that's jumping out. He might be figuring out the next move and directing the forces.
Hold.
That was his whole thing. And that was something that I worked a lot with Kevin Vance, our military advisor.
Alpha, Bravo team on me.
When we work with actors, each kit that we put together is very individualized and different. Unlike a lot of movies you see where gear is kind of universal and multi-purpose, we made it specific to the script and to the story, and Dave allowed us to be really creative with that.
Joel, he's in charge. He's the overall leader, so he doesn't have to carry a bunch of crap because he's telling us to carry it. So what we chose for him is a very comfortable vest. This is a great plate carrier, holds a plate that'll stop rifle rounds. And then this right here is a Winkler knife. Based on the background that Joel's character is, this is the type of knife that he would carry, kind of a tradition within that unit. Belt-wise, Joel is wearing a high threat concealment belt. It's basically one connected piece of Kydex all the way around. It fits really well. He's got 2 pistol mags, 2 rifle mags, and then his Glock pistol. Everyone on this movie put an unbelievable amount of work into making the most authentic, real experience as possible.
This is Katana. She's got my back. She can cut all you in half with one sword stroke, just like mowing the lawn.
Katana, her soul sword traps the souls of anyone it kills. And it's been around for a long, long time.
Katana's Soul Taker. It was actually one of my favorite experiences of the movie, and it was a complete surprise. It's extremely authentic looking. We'd look at sort of historic references to the different emblems and insignia on that.
I was so worried about hitting someone with my sword that I went through a lot of rehearsal time and a lot of practice on my sword fighting. Katana, being the samurai warrior that she is, she can do it without taking a breath. She also has this little writing on her thigh, and it says, "My sword sheds blood." So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we should get a drink sometime.
Boomerang, he was fun. Kevin mocked this up, and what it is it's a first-generation throwing boomerang that had some damage. Maybe it's one that he threw and got damaged when it came back, and he didn't want to get rid of it, and it's something he filed and treated as a...
I like the paracord wrap. I think he likes to drink beer and make things. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
This will get you kicked out of a bar.
Mm-hmm. His boomerangs were actually quite sophisticated and smooth and shiny and quite nice before we really knew exactly how rough and tumble he was going to be.
What they say about the crazy ones?
He throws these boomerangs a lot, and they get damaged. Well, he's not going to throw it away. That's not the kind of person he is. So basically what we did is we fashioned 2 almost like hand-to-hand sort of knives that are boomerang-shaped, that are all chipped and beat up and worn and have all sorts of amazing patina to them, wrapped some military paracord on the handles, and showed those to David, and he immediately loved that.
Yeah, I think the right space is the idea. Kind of like the more tore up and beat up these things are, the better. Just nasty piece of metal you don't want to get cut with.
Jaggedy and sharp.
Yeah, you can see the tetanus.
Right.
It's kind of dangerous. I couldn't always launch a boomerang into the crowd of people that are behind a camera on a film set, but we got to a few times. None of the ones we use in the film actually returned to my hand, but you know, they came pretty close.
Sorry, that's what they do.
They could be used as a sort of hand-to-hand combat weapon as well as something that, you know, he might throw. Yeah, it was great, you know. Had these kind of 2 blades that were like reversed and doing all this action. Hey, craziness.
Harley's bat. We finally came to the right design. We finally came to the thing that David wanted.
This sort of density and weirdness is great.
Okay.
This starts to feel a little tribal, you know what I mean? So I would keep it in the more graphic red and blue space here. It'd be friendlier. It's Harley, she's kind of friendly.
And I would basically take that information upstairs and we would play with that for a little bit, and usually in around 24 hours, and we'd show that to David and we'd be off to the races. He would show it to Margot and she was thrilled with it. Basically, from that point on, she could not step onto the stage without having the bat. Even her stunt doubles the same way. They always have their hand on that thing. There's nothing the prop man wants more than the actor to attach themselves to something that you've built for them. So Anna, in costumes, was coming up with the language, the Harley language.
Oh, that looks great.
Do you like BAM?
Maybe we could do something like hi, exclamation point, or smile, or good night.
We took the language and the handwriting and the style of writing from the garments and expanded it onto the bat and to other props. So what you end up having is a well-flowing language throughout the entire film. It goes from costumes to the props to other areas, and it all makes sense.
Max.
Out of all the guns on this job, and there were a lot of guns, mine is still my favorite. Harley's gun is sick. It's a Rhino revolver with a 6-inch barrel. It's pretty top-heavy, but it's black with like gold embellishments, and it's so cool. And I mean, the tiny details on it that you probably won't ever see on screen, but there's love, hate on the cylinder where the bullets are. It's like love, hate on each one, like a smiley face and evil face. So you never know what bullet you're gonna get. There's little diamonds engraved in all over it. There's HQ on it. There's just a work of art. It's so cool.
Oh, relax.
I like the way it looks. I like the way it all kind of flows together, and there's cohesive looks to things. And I mean, it was very satisfying. As a prop guy, you know, it's a dream come true.
Good work. You know, making this kind of film, there's a lot of R&D that goes into this. It's important to have the details right, to honor the world of the comic book, and at the same time, to engineer these amazing objects to be able to use them on film.
Something tells me a whole lot of people are about to die.
One of the cool things I get to do in my job is shoot action sequences.
Hit up!
Action is tough to shoot. It takes a long time.
David insisted on everything be practical. It just adds a whole other visceral element.
You spend weeks and weeks rehearsing these things and getting the timing right so that on the day you can essentially bang it out and get it done.
Shooting the action sequences was my favorite thing about this whole process.
Light it up!
A lot of analog, old school action stuff. David and the whole stunt team, they didn't want to rely on just a bunch of special effects.
Each film I find has some nut to crack. And on this film, it was how do we get the adversaries to move? And they were all what we call the EAs, which are the eyes of the adversaries. So how do we make them believable, scary, imposing, dangerous, all of those things.
The first encounter with EAs, I mean, I've never experienced anything like that before.
The hard work for us was really figuring out, well, how can we do this? And so we started out doing movement studies.
I'd start about there. Yeah.
And then that can start to get off the feet.
We had a whole process of trying sprinters, parkour, exponents, gymnasts, and we did a whole bunch of tests with rigs and replicated movement within the rigs, jumping and leaping over objects. So that was kind of a real big testing process for us, and we spent months doing that so that David Ayer was happy with the final outcome that looked like real fast-moving people.
Cut!
Originally, that was all designed to be on the street. meaning that we would have had to go onto the streets every night to pull down and put up our rigs and our dressings. In the end, it was decided that the best way to go was to do it in a backlot. So the art department designed this fantastic city block that we had as a backlot. We then suspended an entire overhead flying system, and so then we were able to have people leaping and jumping over cars, off the walls, over dumpsters. So that was a big undertaking. We shot that for about 3 weeks all up.
Rick, why do they look like that?
Stay cool.
There were probably 50 people on wires with 100+ people on the sides working the wires, and there's a swarm of humanity that just looks crazy, you know, and the idea that you could easily have just done it digitally, but David wanted to shoot it and do it practically.
We were in it, and you had to remind yourself, like, right, I got shit to do here, because it was overwhelming to just experience it. And that also brings out truthful performances, because everybody's just reacting to what's actually happening.
The body language of the EAs was a really wonderful collaboration of the physicality of some really amazing stuntmen and actors in very restricting costumes and wardrobe with this kind of blackened, kind of tar look and wearing these masks. But at the same time, heightening that in a way that really wasn't what a human being could do.
There's always going to be CG, there's always going to be green screen, but the less there is, the better in my mind, because I think the audience feels when it's real.
Daddy, what'd you do at work today?
Is it gear protection, eye protection? Guys, it's going to be noisy.
And then we had a second encounter in the office building. Why we really liked the idea of putting it into an office building is it becomes then three-dimensional. So then it gave us the ability of having attacks come from all directions.
There's your flag again!
These creatures, they just go through the doors, they go through windows. We had them coming down through the ceiling, so it became a really interesting three-dimensional battle.
Alex, our art director, she did an amazing job putting that all together and working with stunts to coordinate all the logistics that were needed for that. Because also you need to manufacture stuff like 3-4 times. The glass walls, they get blown and they fall apart. It's a huge undertaking.
So, you shoot, you shoot, you shoot, you shoot.
David came in and said, squib apocalypse, that's what he wanted. So as many squibs as we could fit in that space, and that's what we went for. We tried to cram in as many as we could. There's definitely some destruction in there.
And they had to design things in a way that, you know, if they were focusing on Croc in this moment, that the fight beat that Deadshot's up to, you know, in the back of frame, matches exactly when they turn around. And when you've got 7 or 8 people in the room all fighting multiple adversaries, then you can imagine the chaos.
Ingrid, who's my stunt double, she's a real-life badass. Like, she can do anything. She's nuts. But they were really big advocates for letting us do all our own stunts, which was perfect. I didn't really want to hand Harley over to someone to do half the film, so it was amazing that I got to do a lot of it.
And then there's this one scene where I kind of save everybody's ass. That was a massive effects thing where they had to set up a flamethrower to burn these guys on this like scaffolding. And then they come tumbling down. It's a great shot.
Everyone can see all this trick stuff, right?
Yeah, why?
I'm off my meds.
Our third and final major set piece of the film, the coming together of all the ideas that we've had through the first two. So in the first encounter, they've been actually thrown together, not by choice. And so we're designing action that really involves individuals fighting for themselves. So then we come to the second encounter, which is the first time we get a feeling that the characters actually start working together. So then we get into the third encounter, the end. We're into sort of a spiritual world.
Who's this? What we're doing in the finale. It's really that blend between visual effects and what we can do practically.
For me, the magic has to have a logic and a visual progression and be part of the world. So I drew upon the idea that's in the DC Comics universe about this character's ability to transport people in other dimensions and to have these amazing abilities to transform the environment.
And so how does she do that? How does she manifest that? And that's really the fun part for our guys is designing that visual language. What does that magic look like? And how do we do it in a way that's fresh, but shows that she's not to be messed with? So that was a very long design process for us.
We have to go through a phase of really just exploring, number one, what fits this movie, the idea of the physicality of their magic is something you could touch and you could reach out and grab it if you were to freeze that moment. So in the same way that he develops his characters, we're going to develop the visual effects in this grounded style that still gives you this fantastic vision.
We try to take it as far as we can practically, and David really wanted a big storm, kind of hurricane wind. So we set it up and started soaking the set.
We're designing some pretty otherworld stuff that's happening in this movie, and so it was such a cool thing to riff on creatures and characters and magic and a visual language and have everybody just like, wow.
Well, the idea is also like because the engine is also, I figure the engine sucks the explosion up as it destroys itself, which is why they don't get freaking killed.
There's a lot of creative firepower that comes together to make a film.
Whether it's a director, a DP, costumes, special effects, it all comes down to a brain trust sitting around a table, working out exactly how they're going to do each shot.
Action!
So everything together, it's an incredibly visually dense film. We burned people, we crashed cars, we blew stuff up. It was an epic undertaking.
Woo! What a ride!